The limbic system is a functional, not structural, group of tracts and nuclei located in the cerebrum and diencephalon. The limbic system functions include emotional states, linking conscious intellectual functions of cerebral cortex with unconscious and automatic functions of the brainstem, facilitating memory, storage, and retrieval, and affecting motivation. The major components of the limbic system are the hypothalamus and the nuclei. The hypothalamic nuclei and mammillary body are responsible for emotions, as well as the producing alertness through the reticular activating system. The amygdaloid body has a role in the fight or flight response, and the hippocampus is for long-term memories. You do not need to know the organization of the limbic system. And we are skipping section 1310. And 1311 gets us up finally to the cerebrum. The cerebral hemisphere is divided into the lobes. They are named for the bones that overlie them. So we have the frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital lobe, and we'll see that an internal lobe called the insula once we pull back that temporal lobe. And so here you can see where the insula has been pulled back, and you can see deep in the brain is the insula. So this central sulcus separates two very important strips of the cerebral cortex, the postcentral gyrus and the precentral gyrus. So keep that in mind. Here's the lateral sulcus here. I don't think the parietal occipital sulcus is too important. But this one here, the central sulcus, keep that in mind. So the precentral gyrus here, the red strip here, contains the primary motor cortex, controlling voluntary movements. The postcentral gyrus contains sensory information, so conscious awareness of sensory information coming in from the body. General facts. Each hemisphere receives sensory information from the opposite side of the body and sends motor commands to the opposite side of the body. This crossover occurs in the brainstem and the spinal cord. The hemispheres may look identical and have similar functions, but still have important differences. And there's no real distinct map of the brain because some of the functions overlap. We do not use 10% of the brain. We use all of our brain. The lobes of the cerebral cortex have regions with specific functions. So the cerebral cortex is divided into 6 functional categories: motor, sensory, visual, auditory, olfactory, and gustatory, or taste. And each sensory and motor region is connected to a nearby association area, and that's the region that will interpret the incoming data or coordinate the motor response. So the primary motor cortex directs voluntary movement, and the premotor cortex coordinates learned movements. Think of the primary cortex area as the area where raw data is recorded, and the association area interprets and puts meaning to that raw data. So here is our primary motor cortex, and just anterior to that is the association area. For sensory, you'll see the same kind of situation here, where you've got your primary sensory cortex, somatosensory cortex, and just next to it is the somatosensory association area. So the primary sensory cortex receives sensory information from receptors: touch, pressure, pain, temperature, and then the association area recognizes the different sensations. The gustatory area is in the insula. The olfactory or smell area, you can see right here. The auditory area, there's a primary auditory area. The primary auditory cortex monitors the information or gathers the data, and the association area helps us to recognize the sounds. Same with visual, the visual area in the occipital lobe. So we know that early damage to the occipital lobe could cause people to go blind. So they knew early on the occipital lobe was important in vision. The primary visual cortex receives the visual information, and then the association area in the lighter shade of green interprets the information area, interprets the sensory information. So these integration areas receive information from the association areas, and they direct motor activities, perform analytical functions. Language areas are typically associated with the left hemisphere. Broca's area, this yellow portion here, is important is the motor area for speech production. Prefrontal area integrates information from sensory and performs intellectual functions. So you can see that the cerebrum is pretty complex. It's hard to know all of the different regions of the cerebrum. The left hemisphere specializes in language. Premotor cortex for hand movements is larger on the left side in right-handed people. Left side is for analytical tasks such as math and logic. The right hemisphere analyzes sensory information, interprets sensory information, facial recognition, understanding 3D relationships, and analyzing emotional context of conversation. So there are regional specializations for each hemisphere. And here you're picturing the crossover. So the crossover from the optic, what's coming in through the optic nerve is going to cross over and be coming in the right eye is going to cross over and be interpreted on the left side. You do not have to be able to recognize the location of these different areas. About 9% of us are left-handed, and a lot of musicians and artists are left-handed. Damage to the left occipital lobe would result in which of the following? Loss of right visual field. Where is the auditory cortex located? It would be temporal lobe. And which of these provides direct input to the primary motor cortex when performing voluntary movements? The cerebellum.